Okay, so one more way that you can get different flavors of consequentialism is how much you care about, well, the actual consequences of your actions. So you can have the hardcore consequentialists who just double down and they say, look, what is morally right and what is morally wrong just is determined by the actual consequences of your actions. So, for example, if you take an action, you say buy a nice bracelet at the farmer's market and give it to your friend as a gift, because you like your friend and you want her to be happy. So you give her this bracelet as a gift, and for whatever reason, you doing that causes a butterfly's wings to flap, which causes some air turbulence, which causes something else, and the whole chain of cause and effect eventually leads to the nuclear annihilation of the universe. You've done something seriously morally wrong, because the consequence of you giving this bracelet to your friend is the nuclear annihilation of the universe, which we probably can all agree is a really bad consequence that probably outweighs any good consequences. It definitely outweighs whatever momentary pleasure your friend got getting that bracelet. So this first flavor of consequentialists would say, look, it just was a consequence of you giving that gift that the freaking universe self-destructed. So, yeah, that just means that your action was morally very bad. Now, you might find that incredibly implausible, just because you might think, look, that's not my fault. I didn't know that. And you might also just find it, really unhelpful if you've got this theory that says, look, whether what you do is good or bad is just determined by all the future consequences of that action, and oh yeah, sorry, you can't possibly know what all the future consequences of your actions are, so yeah, you can't possibly know whether what you do is going to be morally good or morally bad. You might say, well, look, consequentialist, why I wanted a normative moral theory in the first place was to have a way of figuring out whether my action was going to be morally good or bad. And now you're telling me that your theory won't even do that for me? Unhelpful. So that's why you might decide, no. None of this first flavor of consequentialist business for me. I want to be one of the second flavors of consequentialism. And here you just say, look, what's morally right and what's morally wrong is not determined by the actual consequences of your actions. Instead, it's determined by what you reasonably believe the consequences of your actions are going to be. So, for example, when I give my friend this bracelet as a gift, there's no reasonable belief that I would have that would somehow result in the nuclear annihilation of the universe. Now, maybe it would. I guess it's possible, but it's not very reasonable to think that that's actually going to be a consequence of my action. Therefore, even if when I give my friend this bracelet, it eventually causes the nuclear annihilation of the universe, I still will have done something that's morally good, because the consequences that I reasonably expect to happen are, well, my friend is going to be happy, and it's going to make me feel happy to give her this gift, and gosh, the person selling the bracelet at the farmer's market is going to have some more spending money, and oh my gosh, everyone's just going to be better off. There's no way I could reasonably have expected that it would all lead to the heat death of the universe. So even though the actual consequences of my action are seriously bad, my action is still morally good because my reasonable expectation was that no really bad consequences are going to happen here. Now, notice, a lot really hinges on this notion of what you can reasonably expect. So you could imagine someone who thinks, oh yeah, I want to buy a gift for my friend on Amazon. It will make her really happy. It'll make me happy. I don't expect any bad consequences from that. But you might think, oh yeah, but maybe that gift that you're getting them is a piece of clothing that maybe not entirely known to you has been made by enslaved laborers. And so by buying that piece of clothing, you're increasing demand for slave labor and therefore causing consequences such that more children get enslaved to make clothes for people to buy off of Amazon and give to their friends. Now, you might say, well, look, I didn't intend for that to happen. All I wanted to do was make my friend happy. But someone could come along and say, though, reasonably, you should know enough about the world that reasonably you should have expected that was going to be a consequence of your action. And so, since you could reasonably expect these bad consequences, what you have to do is weigh out and say, is making my friend happy with this gift off of Amazon, is that going to be outweighed by the children who are being enslaved to make that gift and others like it for her? And in that case, if you can reasonably expect, enslaving children, whoa, that's not worth giving my friend this nice gift, then you might think, look, even though you didn't intend to do anything harmful with this gift, you could reasonably expect it to have these bad consequences. Therefore, it's seriously morally wrong for you to give your friend this gift. So, even the second flavor of consequentialism is really demanding, and it requires that you sort out for yourself, just what sort of knowledge should people be reasonably expected to have, and what kind of knowledge should we reasonably expect people to use in guiding their decisions? Well, we'll find out that that's going to be really key when it comes to making decisions, particularly in the workplace. All right, so you might, however, just think, I don't know, I don't like any of this nonsense. I want a different moral theory. And you might especially be thinking that if you start thinking about some different sorts of examples. So remember, we started off this talk of consequentialism with the scenario that you can see up at the top here, where the consequentialist just says, look, in a situation like this, clearly the morally right thing to do is to kill the one person to save 5 people, because that maximizes the good consequences. But let me give you another scenario. Boom. Never mind, just have to, give you the full Andrew in-class experience of almost toppling over chairs and stuff. I'm fine. Okay, but this scenario over on the left here, you've got the scenario in which you've got the same number of lives at stake. You've got a train barreling down a track, brakes are broken, if nothing happens, it's going to run over these 5 people tied to the track and kill them. Now, this time, instead of being by a lever, you're up on a bridge above the track, and you're up on that bridge with this very massive person, and you happen to know full well that this person is so massive, they've got so much momentum that if they fall in front of that train, they will stop the train, and you'll save the lives of those 5 people who are tied to the track. But also you know that by throwing that person off the bridge as a result of the fall and getting hit by the train, that one person is going to die. So it seems like if you use the same reasoning as you did in the scenario above here, you should say, well, clearly what I ought to do is kill this one person to save the 5 people on the track. But I imagine a lot of you are starting to think, I don't want to do that. That seems like the morally wrong thing to do, to push this guy off a bridge and kill him just to save these 5 people. And so if you're thinking that, you might start wondering, oh man, I don't know. Should I buy into consequentialism? Because it seems like consequentialism is going to tell you, yeah, that's what you should do, right? The consequences of you pushing that one person off the bridge, well, that's one person dead, but it's 5 people who stay alive. So that outweighs the action where you keep that one person alive, but you wind up with 5 other people dead. But if you're like, yeah, but I still don't think I morally should push this person off the bridge, it seems like you're going to need a different theory of normative ethics. Well, we might have one for you. That's deontology. That's what we're studying this week. So read up on that, and I'll come up with some more videos explaining some aspects of deontology for you.